Welcome to my Only One Outlier podcast show, where I'll be exploring the data science career tips with the industry experts who can share their experience and journey with us. I am your host Nirmal, from a new grad to an early career data scientist, from a data analyst to a data engineer, or anyone who wants to start or transition their career into data science. We will bring you all the do's and don'ts to help you guide in your data career path. Hello everyone. Today I have a very special guest on my podcast, Only One Outlier. And then I'm actually very pleased to have him on board. I met him in VMware. He was one of my interviewer. And when I was making a switch from Microsoft, I was amazed to see his in-depth knowledge on security and data science. It has always been one of the rare intersection in my own career. And then, very inspiring to have him on the team as a lead. And then I also learned quite a bit from him. He was also one of my mentors in the VMware. So, it's not like I have not met technically sound people in my career. I have met few. But having technically sound people with immense gratitude and politeness, and that's his definition. So from my end, I looked at his profile just this morning to prepare to introduce himself, and he has done tremendously well. I think more than 12 patents, in the security industry, and I'm glad to have you here today. Welcome, Ereli.
Thanks, Nirmal. I'm glad to be here, and thanks for the kind words. It's really nice to hear that from someone you worked with. And I can give a little bit of my kind of background, if that's appropriate. So I have a kind of a non-traditional background. So I think a lot of people get into their careers through, very clear thinking. And for me, it was never clear what I wanted to do. And I was very lucky to have mentors and kind of managers that allowed me to grow. So I think I got into technology very early on, like as a teenager. My father introduced me to an owner of a small business who was repairing and installing PCs, and I was installing these personal computers in dental clinics and schools. And I never thought about taking this vocation seriously. But at some point in life, it kind of dawns on you that sometimes it's easy to take the sort of the path that is sort of the least friction path. So I did a very Israeli career type of move where you first do your military service, and then after you finish the military service, you figure out what you want to do. After much deliberation and different aspects, different avenues that I was considering, I ended up after my undergrad in a pen testing job, which really I was not qualified to do, but the manager of that consultancy said, I can train you. And he had military experience in doing, pen testing, and he was very kind and took me and sort of trained me on the job to do pen testing. And that really opened the world for me. I didn't know you can get paid to, break things. And that was, a pivotal opportunity for me. And after working with him for a couple of years, I was able to find a job as a domain expert in security at RSA's data science team. And that was a very exciting moment to be in data science, and talking about 2012, and having worked with people that have real PhDs and real in science, but lack that kind of security knowledge. I was able to get excited about data science and what it can do to solve business problems, and try to pivot my own career towards not only understanding the world of security and IT security software, but also understand the domain of data science. And I've tried to do that ever since. And I was very fortunate to work across multiple domains of, I would say, security. So fraud detection in the banking world, network data, log data, and that has led me to where I am today.
Yeah. Thank you so much for giving that brief overview and kind of like how journey shaped into or actually fall into the pieces of cyber and data science, right? So I think your journey also takes you back to the education world of you're from Israel, right? So I was reading a little bit, and then I saw that quite a bit of Reddit post where people are talking about from there, usually, I don't know if it is in the air or what, like there are many good institutes where people are very much into the STEM field, and they are very talented, and a lot of publications, even the scientific research has come from Israel, right? So I think growing up, was that also, you think, one of the key reason that, like you were technically sound, besides the work you do with your father to begin playing with the computers in early age?
Yeah, I think I grew with my brother, who was older, but only by very little. We have only a year and I think 2 months difference between us. And my brother was always more into computers than me. I was the one playing soccer outside, and he was the one that was really asking my father to buy him books on assembly when he was too young to be interested in those kind of things.
Yeah.
So I always thought I'm very different, and we're completely different personalities. I always knew that I could learn something if I wanted to, but I didn't. When I was 10 years old, I didn't think about assembly as being the most interesting thing in the world. But I knew that my father, has done a lot of things in IT himself, and my brother has chosen that path for himself very early on. Even in school, he wanted to do electronics and physics and understand really the science. And I think for me, it was you become curious about different things and different points in life. I'm always a very curious person, but I wasn't focused on this until early or later on in my career, where I said, well, no, I actually want to understand how these machines work, and I want to understand how network protocols and there's a lot of depth that you can dive into where you're a child, you don't know that. So I think I was very fortunate to kind of get kind of a broad education, and even my university was not in computer science. And I think that actually opens up your mind to different types of thinking. So one of the best courses I took in university was about psycholinguistics, and they talk about how the brain works. And it was just an undergrad level course, but for me, I think that even having these kind of broad education courses now allows me to kind of understand other domains a little bit more. If someone talks about biology or someone talks about neural networks, I can draw tiny parallels between those worlds, and I feel like it's a good way to get an education. And generally in Israel, the belief is that people can have choices, unlike some countries where they decide at the age of 12 what you're going to do in your life, and they have these kind of psychometric or SAT types exam that determine your. In Israel, the belief is that people can have second chances. Even if you didn't do well in high school, they would let you retake the exams until you can get into university. They don't want to tell people you're going to mechanical school, nothing will come out of you. And I think that is a great mindset for a nation to have, is kind of try to elevate everyone up and not just predetermine your life based on something that happened when you're a child.
Yeah, that's true. Now it reminds me about the education system back home in my country, in Nepal, where it is changing now. It was not great. The reason is when you said about supporting folks to give a second chance, and also welcoming multiple domains or fields, right? So that's, I think, very important. I think now with the rise of information, a lot of people are understanding that value that your son or daughter can do better in any other field besides engineering or the science field, right? So STEM used to be very, very grounded stereotype in a way, but it has been changing, which I like about it too. So yeah, thanks for sharing that. The other question I had was your military commitment, and I also did military, in US, and that was kind of tangential from my career path. But I look back in my military career, and then even if I did not learn too much on the tech side, I learned quite a bit on the life side, so there's so much lessons I learned, and which is actually transferable to professional career. So I wanted to understand, how was your experience? I think, was it like 2 years of mandatory service? How did it go?
It's 3 years in Israel when I was doing my service. And I think it starts early on. So in Israel, they start actually asking you to go and do some sort of a test and an interview, I think when you're 16. So by the time you're 16, you already are faced with the question, what do you want to do in the army? And it's not that you have a choice, because for at least for secular men, the army is not optional. Now there are paths for people that are pacifist, or women have, if they're religious, you might get exempt. But for men, it is going to happen. So you have a choice if you want to take ownership of that, something that's going to happen to you or not. Some people say, I don't want to do it. And then when they're joining the military at the age of 18, they don't know what they're going to do. They will just get surprised, and as they'll go to a center on the day that was determined for them, and they'll get surprised into some sort of training. Maybe they'll learn to drive a truck. Maybe they'll do something that's not what they were planning to do. So for me, I wanted to be part of that and influence that process. So I did a intensive Arabic course before starting my military service. And following that course, I did a job. My first job in the army was teaching Arabic. So obviously I was not very good at Arabic compared to a native speaker, but it was good enough for the army to do something with my time. And I then decided to go and do Officers Academy and stay a bit longer. And I also spent time being what they call a liaison officer. So my job there was to be the contact person between the Israeli army and NGOs working in the Gaza Strip. So all the Red Cross and UN agencies would go through the office that I helped manage, and basically get services from the Israeli army regarding border crossing and things of that nature. So that is very different than kind of my career, but it did teach me a lot of things about like how to operate within large organizations, and it did expose me to a completely different world that you can imagine your life in. As a high school student, you never even heard of diplomacy or NGOs, and you have no insight into these industries. And now it gave me an opportunity to be doing something helpful, and also learn a lot about that industry and how to help them. And generally, there's a sense of mission that you get from doing something positive. And I think I always felt that my job at the army was a little bit stressful. Sometimes I would get, they would call me if something wasn't working well, and I have to operate under this sense of urgency. But it also gave me a sense of mission, of doing something important and trying to make, these NGOs have, a very positive mission in general, and the army wants to facilitate their work and care for human lives, and it was very gratifying to be able to do something positive.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I do can relate that mission oriented. You have a sense of urgency, and you feel like you have a responsibility to do something by certain time to get the mission accomplished. And I think those kind of skills kind of carry over. I feel like even if it was not exactly me writing a data science code or building a model today, versus the some broken signal I had to fix in the middle of the night, right? So I think there's some correlation. I think we can hey, this thing has to work by tomorrow for my commander in chief to communicate, right? So, and I was into it. The same thing, right? So this model has been not working properly, then I think it gives us that understanding for sure, different perspective in life for sure. I always tell myself that now I'm thinking, right, you actually went in the early age then, because I went after my master's. So, I can only imagine at that period of time when you were 16, 18, with that cognitive mindset, you going in the military and trying to understand that bigger picture. I mean, as you said, I think it's a big organization and you are part of it, right? So for me, it was like, where do I fit in this big puzzle, right? Trying to understand that itself was challenging in the beginning. Yeah, so let's switch gear a little bit. Your startup journey, I think you are out of stealth mode now, so we can probably talk a little bit about it. But while I was checking your profile, you already had some experience of a startup beforehand, this one, right? So in 2018, I saw you had some startup being ran for home automation or something. So before I come to your latest project, let's talk about that one. How was that one?
So I think so my first actual startup work was when I moved to London, and I worked for I was, I think, employee number 10 or something with a company called Ravlin, and that was also, you know, a great startup experience. And when I moved to the US, I was looking for something. I moved because of my wife's career, but then for me, I was trying to find the path forward, and I love the energy of startups and the idea of innovation and working on something that is kind of not a solved problem, something that is really an area that is close to improvement, but not yet something that is kind of commoditized. And I tried to find something to do in that area. I found a team of people. We tried to do a little bit of fundraising and build. One of my friends had this idea about smart appliances. And I think I learned a little bit from that work. I did get to the point where we were meeting with investors, but eventually I think, you know, while we had a good idea, and I believe that, you know, this idea will actually come from the vendors of this industry in the future, we were not ready to kind of fundraise. VCs were a bit, you know, honest and kind of declined our well, they didn't really support us. And that's part of the experience. I think you need a little bit of thick skin to raise funding for your startup. Well, you don't have to be a founder to work at a startup. I think that's one of the things that you kind of have to learn, is that founding is different than working at a startup, because you have to win the support of VCs, and that requires more than, I would say, the typical engineer skill set. And I think for many people, while exploring this path is lucrative, if you like engineering, and I'm very much a person who's now able to geek out on you know, technology and enjoy the technical side, I wasn't, I guess, fully committed to just, you know, doing that. So I think after a while trying to do that, I sort of basically switched gears and joined a mature company, and that's how I ended up with Carbon Black. I think that the startup experience has taught me a couple of things about, you know, both bootstrapping, you know, technologically, starting something from scratch, but also understanding what people expect to see in an accomplished team and an accomplished product and in a vision. And speaking the right language is a big part of that, but also, you know, creating a team and creating the confidence, not in just the technology, the idea, but as you as a team and individuals to kind of put money behind you as a startup, which is useful outside of startups as well. If you work inside a large company and you want to pitch in a new feature to a product that is slightly more complex, you need essentially the same skills. You need to be able to articulate why your team should be able to get the funding and allowed to be working on this particular problem, and why the business should care about it. So while it is a failure that, you know, that thing didn't take off, I learned a lot, and I think that's almost something that I would recommend people to do if they're, you know, on the fence and considering it.
Yeah. No, thanks for sharing that. I do agree. I mean, the more in being in the, you know, the work environment business so far, everything can be articulated as a sales speech at some point of time, right? Because it's not only for a startup, as you mentioned. I think even in anyone's current work, like for you to justify why this project needs to happen, right? What is the ROI, or if there's any man hours you're going to save, you're going to generate some money. How do you convince that that idea is solid to be in production or implemented, right? So it's very important to articulate that for sure. Now I think, and then I love the idea of learning from failures. I mean, there's nothing that goes, something that didn't take off doesn't mean that you didn't get anything out of it. You probably have tremendous amount of knowledge that you learned for your new startup, which you recently started, right? So tell us something about 7AI. I actually love the name. How do you come up with the name and tell us about it?
The name, I think we have to save that one because it's a bit random. But okay. I think the startup I joined in December, 7AI, is a kind of an early stage startup, and the founders, Jonathan and Lior, they are the co-founders of a company called cybersecurity. So they have spent a fair amount of their career building cyberism. And when I knew, when I from a conference and through a mutual friend, and when the time was, when they approached me about this opportunity, I was very keen to kind of hear more and join. And I think we're at the early stage now, so we haven't really launched a commercial product. We're at a very good position in kind of building the data and building the product to allow us to launch commercially soon. But I can tell you something about like the process, and I think that a startup like this is really something you could not do internally. And I think my observation was that having worked at companies like VMware, which was the company that acquired Carbon Black, and having worked at RSA, which was part of EMC at the time and part of kind of the Dell holding organization, was that large companies often don't innovate in the same way that startups do, in the sense that they don't put so much money on an idea. And if someone is saying something like, listen, the attackers are using AI, and attackers using AI to create better attacks, and you can think about it from anything from exploit generation to phishing attacks. If you're on the ecosystem of cybercrime, you know that these tools are now available for you, and you can create better attacks and a larger volume of attacks. So having that assumption in mind, you need to bring in additional defensive tools and also understand the security ecosystem as a whole. So we as a security industry have created a situation where there are dozens of products specialized in either visibility or prevention for more than 2 decades now. So if you think about the early days of the internet, there was something called ping of death, and people created firewalls to prevent that. And we had all these additional attacks created, and then new defensive techniques and preventive techniques were created. But in reality, if you are operating a security program today as a CISO, you are spending a lot of money on building a team and building a security organization. And it's not trivial to hire and train your people to do it. So having, someone to help you is a very lucrative offer. And I think we are seeing the revolution of AI as being kind of a stepping stone. While we've been seeing machine learning used in a variety of industries, and my career has been, in some of these places, we're now at the point where LLMs are taking off, and we see a kind of a leap forward in terms of algorithms. If you look at the random forest paper, it's based on decision trees. If you look at decision trees, it was written in the 60s. So we are using algorithms effectively. That some of them are from the 60s, and you can get immense value from some of the tree-based algorithms for some domains.
Right.
But we see a leap in the quality and the things you can do with large language models and generative AI in general. And that is something that we intend to harvest and put to aid the defenders.
So basically, not going too deep at the high level, it will be leveraging using Gen AI and LLMs to do some of the ML model, and that models can be implemented on the defensive tools, right, in the endpoints. That is the idea behind it.
I think if you look at every security product out there, they always assume that there is a human at the end of the equation. So the product would say, I'm going to let you run queries and look at your cloud posture. I'm going to let you run queries and look at your logs data. I'm going to let you run very detailed queries and analyze every endpoint you have in your fleet.
Right.
But they assume you as a human, and you as a human have memory. And within that memory, you will contain all the information about past investigations, about future investigations, and you will have that ability to process that information. And because of the explosion of tools and the explosion of attacks, that volume of alerts from the vendors is overwhelming most teams, and they have to aggressively prioritize. And what happens is that the vendors have created a lot of detections, a lot of capabilities to create visibility into things that may be malicious. But it's not enough to have visibility if you don't have eyes to look at it. Right. So now you have aggressively prioritization effort to kind of focus your eyes on what's important, but then you miss out some of the detections. No one looks at them. And in many cases, and there have been cases of very famous and sort of high visibility attacks, where if you go and you do your incident response, you see that there were lots of signals that were being ignored because of the volume. And essentially, the solution here is not, I think what we believe is not to change the prioritization algorithm and figure out how to prioritize which alerts to look at, is to actually look at more alerts. And that requires being able to have more people in your team. And because that's not really an option with the budgets that teams have, we have to bring in a different mindset. And that's what we're trying to build. It's something that will really not replace you, but aid you as a human that is currently focused on, I say, a lot of false positives, a lot of kind of low quality detections, to get you to focus on both the things that are uniquely human and things that are already kind of prioritized by our system. And by say prioritize, I mean actually investigated.
Right. No, it makes sense. I think I also kind of relate with that. Like, it's not all the detection tools or anything we have so far. I mean, we have enough tools. It's not the lack of the tools, right? So, and it's also the alerts volume, as you mentioned. I mean, companies are investing in multiple tools. They're like, hey, if this tool is not catching, this may catch it. Then eventually what they're doing is just getting more alerts on the table to process, right? On their list to process. And yeah, I think that's interesting. So the moment we try to use any ML or any technique algorithm to prioritize the list, there's still a chance that we may miss it, because I mean, if you never come across that in a historical set, your model will always think that as a low priority. And was that the actual, like you mentioned, you see in the data, I mean, anything that has happened so far, I think if you look into the logs deeply, it's there somewhere, right? Something happened somewhere. So
but think about the fact that when you train someone, you train them on the way we train humans to be security analysts is today you can go and get a degree in being an analyst. So in your degree, you study. It's different from a computer science degree, right? You would study in your curriculum, a very wide area of topics, trying to give you visibility into how networks work, operating systems, how attackers operate, and trying to cover as much as ground. So give you the kind of the breadth of knowledge that is required to do the job, because in reality attacks are coming in every direction. They're not coming just in one place. You've got phishing, you've got malware, you've got smishing, you've got phone attacks. So we've got all these attacks because attackers are very flexible, and every time we create something that requires a human to interpret the information or act, we are creating an opportunity to do kind of like cost arbitrage. So a lot of the times, think about more traditional domains outside of cybersecurity, for example, in the world of bot prevention. The introduction of CAPTCHAs have created a cost-based pain for the people that are trying to do, let's say, scraping. So by introducing CAPTCHA, you turned the cost from $0 to the cost of running a CAPTCHA breaking program. And those programs exist. You can pay a couple of cents per CAPTCHA and you'll get it resolved in 10 seconds.
Right.
So we are thinking, when we introduce alerts that are bad and are not kind of in the fidelity that users expect, we're creating a cost for them. And that's that's a big operational challenge. And we're sort of giving ourselves CAPTCHAs essentially when we create alerts that require human actions. So if you got an alert that says there's ransomware on someone's machine, but the alert, it doesn't say we stopped it from running, it just says it's ransomware. Yeah. And you have to go and operate and start saying, let's exercise my ability to run a response playbook and mitigate this attack by operating manually. Yeah. And that means that you have to be operating 24/7. You have to get paged, and all those things are expensive to do and build, and not trivial for any, especially for medium-sized companies.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the mindset and everything has to change for sure. Like at least the focus, like what is the main thing that we can tackle. All right, so I wish you very best on this new startup journey, and hopefully love to catch up sometime offline and learn more about it. So and my next thing, let's take a quick segue now from this tech and cyber. So life blending with tech, right? So this is a very fast moving sometimes. We have to learn new things, new stuff, get busy in the work. How does Ereli find his peace of mind, or how does Ereli recharges himself on his personal side of the life?
Yeah, I mean, I like to find activities that really allow you to focus. Personally, I love motorcycles. I have a motorcycle. I have the Ducati Scrambler, and I enjoy riding it because the motorcycle is obviously it's a little bit of a high risk machine to operate and requires your focus. Because of the focus, your brain is really engaged in the task of operating the machine, and you don't think about anything else. Also, if the weather is pleasant, the wind blowing through your hair, if you with the helmet you don't really feel it, but you know what I mean. It is very pleasant experience, and I try to ride my motorcycle. I also have a bicycle, and I think we have the New England weather is not perfect, but it gives us plenty of days to actually explore the parks here, and just doing something that requires a little bit of focus, exercise is something that I really enjoy doing, and it's completely different than my kind of routine life.
Right. I know you did your undergrad in Amsterdam, I believe, and I can tell the passion towards biking, because when I was traveling to Amsterdam, I saw bikes everywhere. I'm like, there was a parking lot filled with bikes. I'm like, me and my wife were chatting. Oh, wow. And I'm like, this is probably the healthiest place. Everyone goes around on bikes.
Well, I think if you look at their snacks, what they call snacks, all deep fried delicacies. So maybe not the healthiest in terms of cuisine, but definitely lifestyle-wise, they have a really good balance, and they've advocated for getting those the public infrastructure to support that. And I think Amsterdam, and where I went to school, Utrecht, it's a very livable city. I think you can live a life without owning a car. And now we live in the US, so it's unheard of that someone would be able to get by without a car. So I miss that part of my life, and I think where I live today, I bike just for pleasure. So it's never for commute purposes.
I know, yeah. Boston is pretty, right? It gets pretty in the summertime, and I had few of my friends when I was in upstate New York from my school. I used to travel on the weekends. Visit them, and I actually loved the city for sure. A lot of history, nice places to go around. And then so one thing, now we are almost coming to an end. Your mentorship and learning, so I saw you also let people to schedule some time. Obviously I don't know how you are doing that, and if my audience, they wanted to set up some time to learn about cybersecurity or data science, if you have a calendar or something, then I can also tell them to, find some time, because obviously I know I can tell that they will learn for sure. I learned a lot when I scheduled time with you. So
yeah, I mean, I haven't done a lot of that recently, since startup life is very demanding. But I do this from time to time. I think there's a lot of gratitude that I have for the people that really mentored me and helped me in my career. So there's obviously aspects of networking and things. Sometimes you need an introduction to someone that you may know. But I also like helping people that are basically asking these questions. How do I transition from X to Y? And because I've done some non-orthodox career path, I feel like I have a good vantage point, and sort of being an insider to a certain industry, I can shed light on what people look at when they kind of look for a candidate, especially in the areas that I worked on. So security and machine learning applications, or applied machine learning, I would say, is where I can really be helpful. And I've done a couple of these, for people that are transitioning from academia or getting in from more traditional software engineering roles to do MLE, and I'm happy to, if there are people that are interested, I'm always happy to help.
And then lastly, where is the new wave of AI, LLM, Gen AI, so, I mean, everything, especially in the AI world, is almost like a double-edged sword, right? Like we get the advantage. I mean, we are, like, for example, you are building 7AI using the Gen AI tools and everything, right? Adversaries, on the other hand, also have the same tool, and they are also using the same thing to fight against us, right? So how do you think this is playing out, or this will play out in future, right? So I mean, it's just a closing statement, like how AI will help in the cyber, right? How does it go change the cyber in a way?
I think that AI is both a revolution, but also like an incremental step in not a revolution in many aspects. I would say what drives cybercrime is greed and money. And we live in a world where the greed and money of the cyber criminals is what is triggering most of the attacks we see. There is also international espionage is part of it. But if you try to understand what is the motivation of espionage, it's different than cybercrime. And as long as that exists, we'll see a need to kind of defend against that motivation. And I don't believe that there is an ability to kind of put the genie back in the bottle. This is unlike, the nuclear arms race or something like that. There is no way to control the technology at this point. And because of the open source models and the kind of relatively low bar to get your hands on a working LLM and do whatever you want with it, I think that we don't have an option of basically preventing criminals from getting access to these technologies. So we have to build better defenses. We as humans are, 20 years ago, we were saying, oh, everything can be photoshopped. And now everything can be AI generated, right? So we live in a world where people increase their level of distrust of, in information, in systems and in processes. And we have to kind of continue to create mechanisms to establish trust. Essentially, that is the fundamental problem with the proliferation of all these technologies, is that people will distrust each other. People will think everything is a fake message, fake communication. And we have to create better ways to let people defend themselves and trust each other when they see something online.
Yeah, thank you so much. There's obviously so many other questions I wanted to ask, but we'll catch up again next time. And thank you so much for your time today and coming to the show. It was a pleasure having you. A lot of learnings in cyber data science, how your career and everything. So thanks again.
Thank you, Nirmal. My pleasure.
Yeah.